Welcome to Gay News Radio with Brandon Carmody, right here on America's #1, the GNR Radio Network.
You are listening to Gay News Radio. I am Brandon Carmody. Our guest today was the named plaintiff in Obergefell v. Hodges. He is an activist for marriage equality, civil rights, and everything LGBTQ. And now he is the co-author of the new book, Love Wins, teaming up with Debbie Zenziber. Please welcome Jim Obergefell back to GNR.
Thanks, Brandon. Great to be here.
Thank you, Jim. So the cover reads, The Lovers and Lawyers Who Fought the Landmark Case for Marriage Equality. I did read a review in the Charlotte Observer that noted 3 takeaways from your book. It recounts the legal battle over the Supreme Court's landmark ruling on same-sex marriage. Reporter Debbie Zenziber and plaintiff Jim Obergefell team up, and this book is both a love story and a courtroom drama, so why don't we begin there? Will you please take us inside the book Love Wins and share with our listeners what will they find in the pages of this story?
Well, they will find exactly that. They'll find a love story wrapped in a legal thriller. And it isn't just the story of John and me. What I really like about the book is we took the bigger picture. We didn't focus just on my husband John and me. We talk about some of the other plaintiffs. You learn about their lives and their families and why they decided to wage this fight. You learn about our attorney, Al Gerhardstein, and his history of fighting for civil rights in Cincinnati. And you learn more about a couple of the judges. And also the city of Cincinnati itself is a character in the book because of the great changes in Cincinnati as far as acceptance and attitudes toward the LGBTQ community. So it's the big picture. At the heart of it is a love story, but you get to learn a lot about other people and how we ended up in the Supreme Court and how that all happened.
Okay, so you worked with Debbie Zenziber, so she's an investigative reporter at the Washington Post and now the author of Love Wins. So could you tell us a little bit about Debbie? How did she get involved with the project, and how did having Debbie on board change the dynamic of this book?
Happy to. Well, the great thing about Debbie, she is a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist, so she has incredible writing skills and incredible research skills. But for me, from the start, one of the things that made this, in essence, a no-brainer when she approached me about writing the book is she's also a former relative. She was married to John's first cousin. So John's Aunt Paulette, who married us. Yes. John's Aunt Paulette, who married us, she has one son, and her son Keith was formerly married to Debbie. So it brought along this base level of comfort and safety and trust working with Debbie on the book. And over time, as our case moved forward, a lot of people would say, Jim, you should write a book. You should write a book. And for about the first year, it wasn't something I could really consider. I just wasn't emotionally in a place to do that. And as I started to heal and work through my grief, it started to become something that I could consider, and people kept saying it. Well, Debbie called really out of the blue one afternoon last year and said, Jim, I have an agent who has been encouraging me to write a book, and I don't want to do anything unless it's something I'm passionate about, and this story is it. You want to write a book? So we talked about it some more and decided, yeah, let's write this book. So that's how it happened.
Fantastic. And I know that you've got the support of a publisher and a whole team that's been really, really great. Now, one of your readers noted not to read it on a plane and to bring plenty of tissues. And I know that your publisher is sending me a copy. I'd like to thank them in advance, but I unfortunately haven't received it or have the honor of reading your book. So I'll have to ask you, how personal, how emotional, and in-depth into the story and the events with John and then the subsequent legal battle does the book take us? Does the book put us front row seat as if we're watching in the first person?
I think it does. For our story, the book covers John's and my story, not just as a couple, but both of us from our childhoods on. not in super incredible detail, but you learn what life was like for us growing up, our coming out process, our family dynamics. So you learn a lot of that information. And then when we get to the point John and I become a couple, and especially after he was diagnosed with ALS, you get to learn what that was like, how our life was when John was diagnosed, and as I was his primary caregiver and taking care of him. And you get to understand and learn why we decided to do this, and all of the effort we had to take to just simply get married. So you get all of that. You get the personal stuff and the things that make some people cry, and then you also get the legal side of things. But we really tried hard not to make it legalese. It covers the legal concepts, but it does it in a very readable way. It's not really high, it's not full of legal terms and all of that. So it's very very easy to read and understand. So you get to go with us on the entire ride from the moment we filed suit in federal district court through appeals court to the Supreme Court.
Absolutely, and I can't wait to receive my copy and read it. I'm a terrible book reader myself, but I know this is a book that I'm going to read from cover to cover, and then the next time we meet, we'll get together on that. So, Jim, would you be so kind as to read us a passage or two from Love Wins?
Yeah, absolutely. And what I will do is I will read from the prologue of the book, and here goes. July 16th, 2013. Soon it would be time for goodbye. Husband was dying, and with a gentle knock on the bedroom door long past midnight, it would come now, quickly. But Jim Obergefell, married for 5 days, didn't want to think about a funeral. Not on this bright July morning when Cincinnati was in the throes of summer and his husband John was sitting up in bed because the spasms that coursed from his hips to his toes had mercifully subsided. John Arthur couldn't wear a wedding ring. The weight of it hurt his fingers. He was naked under an electric blanket because clothing made his skin burn. His voice, what was left of it, had become winded and hoarse, a labored delivery of syllables and sounds that required great concentration and long, shallow breath. Jim had to bend low to hear him, endlessly struck that a man who'd once had such a deep and lyrical laugh could now produce only a whisper. But for 5 days, John had pushed out a single, perfect word. Husband. Good night, husband. Good morning, husband. I love you, husband. Disease had struck suddenly, just after John's 45th birthday 2 years earlier, when his left foot started dragging as if a 10-pound weight was bearing down on his shoe, and everything they knew shifted and splintered. The diagnosis of ALS had been a death sentence. The neurological disorder attacks the nerve cells in the brain and spinal cord, eventually robbing every muscle in the body of movement, including the diaphragm, which facilitates airflow to the lungs. Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis literally suffocates its victims to death. Jim glanced at John in the bedroom they'd once shared, painted pale yellow and dominated by a hospital bed that compressed and expanded beneath John's weight. Jim had moved to the guest room, but already this morning he had spent several hours in a chair by John's bedside, watching the news on a television set loud enough to overcome the constant whoosh of an oxygen generator that pumped air through a line looping over John's ears and up into his nostrils. The bedroom faced east, and Jim had opened the window blinds so John could feel the sun. On this day, they were expecting a visitor. Jim was nervous about meeting a civil rights lawyer who had spent the better part of 30 years suing the city of Cincinnati. But when L. Gerhardstein rapped on the door of their downtown condominium just after 2 p.m., his smile was benign and his graying sideburns were slightly disheveled, as if he had just come in from a run. He adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses, and when he shook Jim's hand, the embrace was firm and friendly. Al followed Jim down the length of the hall to the bedroom, where John was propped up on pillows, waiting. Dropping his briefcase to the floor, Al barely glanced at the hulking hospital bed. His younger sister, one of 6 Gerhardstein siblings, was paralyzed by multiple sclerosis, and on Saturday mornings, Al sipped coffee by her bedside until her caregiver arrived. He leaned forward and rested a hand on John's shoulder, and then he said, "Tell me about your wedding." "Saying I'd wed was the most beautiful moment of my life," Jim said, looking at John. whose frail frame was hidden beneath the blanket, and remembering the lanky, grinning man with a mop of blonde hair. They had spent more than 20 years together in Cincinnati, spread across the hills and low ridges of the Ohio Valley, but had never felt compelled to marry because Ohio had banned same-sex marriage, and the federal government didn't recognize the state-sanctioned marriages of gay couples anyway. But 3 weeks earlier, the U.S. Supreme Court had delivered an important win to the gay community, finding that same-sex couples married under state law deserved all the federal benefits that came with it, spanning health care, Social Security, veterans assistance, housing, taxes. So Jim and John had traveled to Maryland to marry, each mile in a private plane fixed with medical equipment wearing on John's fragile body. He suffered, Jim told Al. It's frustrating and hurtful to know that the person you love went through terrible pain and discomfort just to do something millions of others take for granted. I wanted us to be treated the same, John said slowly, each word a struggle. And I want Jim to be legally taken care of after I die. Al listened without taking notes. Once, 20 years earlier, when he had been in his early 40s juggling 3 children and a shoestring law practice that operated on contingency, the voters of Cincinnati had changed the city's charter, permanently banning all laws that would protect the gay community from discrimination in areas like housing and employment. Al, it was an arbitrary and hateful provision, and he sued in federal court. He spent nearly 5 years working without pay, and when the case was done, he questioned the city, the courts, and the application of law. He thought about shuttering his practice and taking up teaching, moving his family from Cincinnati. He wasn't sure if he would ever take on another gay rights case, but then United States v. Windsor on June 26th had struck down a key provision of the Defense of Marriage Act, which for more than 15 years defined marriage solely as a union between one man and one woman. The law, Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy wrote in the opinion overturning it, told gay couples that their otherwise valid marriages are unworthy of federal recognition. Over late nights in a dusty office overlooking a bus stop in the federal courthouse, a poster of Rosa Parks in the lobby, and hate mail tacked to a bulletin board in the kitchen, Al studied Ohio's ban on same-sex marriage, passed by a majority of voters in 2004. He discovered a striking inconsistency. Ohio prohibited first cousins and minors from marrying, but would recognize the marriages if they were performed in another state. The place of celebration rule came from a long-standing legal principle known as lex loci contractus, the Latin term for law of the place where the contract is made. But Ohio didn't apply the principle equally. Out-of-state marriages among same-sex couples were excluded. If the federal government after the Windsor decision had to recognize same-sex marriages on an equal basis with heterosexual marriages, Al thought, shouldn't states like Ohio have to recognize them too? The finding seemed entirely existential until a mutual friend told Al about John, Jim, and their marriage in Maryland. On a hunch, Al hurried to his filing cabinet and dug out a death certificate saved from an old lawsuit. He scanned the document from the Ohio Department of Health and immediately found what he was looking for. This is it, he whispered, and 3 days later he went to meet John and Jim. When Jim got up for water, Al followed him into the dining room and pulled out the death certificate. I'm sure you haven't thought about this, because who thinks about a death certificate when you've just gotten married? Al pointed to Section 10, marital status. Al pointed to Section 11, surviving spouse. Jim had never studied a death certificate before, and he followed Al's fingers across the page. In Ohio, Al explained, their marriage did not exist. John would be classified as single when he died, and the box where Jim expected to be named as the surviving spouse would be left blank. In death, they would be strangers. John's last official record as a person will be wrong, Al said gently. Jim's head started hurting as he thought about John, who had traveled nearly 500 miles to marry, even though his burns ached and his skin burned. I can't believe this, he said, wiping at tears with the back of his hand. I just can't believe this. Across the country, lawyers and advocacy groups were focused on a broader mission, delivering same-sex marriage to all 50 states. But Al saw a more narrow, tangible, and urgent need, one that had never been fully explored in an American courtroom. He asked Jim, do you want to talk about ways that you can fix this for you and John and make a difference for all gays here in Ohio? Jim wasn't sure if there was room in their lives for a federal lawsuit, but when he walked back down the hall and looked at John, whose wedding ring sat on a nightstand by the bed, there was no longer any question. Jim had no idea where the case might lead or how it would end, but with John's permission, Jim signed John's name and then his own to some papers that Al laid out in front of them. Alone in the fading light of the yellow bedroom, Jim and his husband launched the first ever challenge to Ohio's ban on the recognition of same-sex marriage, enshrined in the state's constitution by 3.3 million voters.
Wow.
That's it.
Thank you, Jim. I'm a little bit teary on this end. That's very powerful. One thing I do want to just applaud you for is for the benefit of the readers and for the world that can't currently know John. And I sincerely mean this, sir. You've done so much justice by him and given him the dignity and human face in this love story. And I just thank you. That passage was incredible, sir.
Thanks, Brandon. That means a lot. And, it's important for me to always remember that this started because I love John, and without him and without our marriage, none of this would have happened, and it's important to keep him alive.
Yeah. Now, oftentimes, when history is made and a book comes out, sometimes Hollywood tends to pop up with the movie within a few months or a few years after the fact. Do you think that Love Wins will ever be made into a motion picture? And now that the book is coming out and we come up on the anniversary, do you think Hollywood is going to want to tell your story?
Well, actually, last summer when we sent out the book proposal, before we actually sold the book, we sold the movie rights.
Really?
So a movie is already in the works. Yes, correct. Temple Hill Productions and Fox 2000 are making a movie. And currently the screenwriter, Chris Weitz, who was the screenwriter for the movie About a Boy, he is hard at work on the screenplay as we speak.
Excellent. So it's in the screenwriting process. That's incredible.
It is, correct.
That's great. That's great. Now, I want to talk about the anniversary. This is so important for everyone. So as we approach the one-year anniversary of the Supreme Court's historic decision, which bears your name, Obergefell v. Hodges, that means that Americans have had the legal right to marry a same-sex partner and having legal recognition all of this time. But unfortunately, in the time since, we have seen some kind of ugly state-by-state, I want to call them either anti-LGBT or hate bills that have been known and passed in states like North Carolina, Mississippi, and Tennessee. So, Jim, I hesitate to describe this conservative movement against us in comparison to like the Sith or the dark side from Star Wars, but it's like they're trying to destroy everything good in the universe and shape it into their image. So kind of looking at this anti-LGBT movement against us, what is your reaction to some of these extreme state-by-state measures, like the transgender bathroom bill in North Carolina?
I love your characterization, and I think that's actually pretty appropriate. It saddens me greatly that our country and some people in our country seem unwilling to treat other people equally, and it seems like some people just need other people to denigrate, to blame, to tell lies about, and these bills across the country are just, they're hateful. They're vicious and hateful. Now, I think most of us expected a backlash to marriage equality, but I certainly never expected it to be this vicious. And it's especially disheartening to see how they're now attacking the transgender community. And I think part of that is, they lost marriage equality and they're seeing changes in attitudes and in rights and protections afforded to lesbian, gays, and bisexuals. So in some ways they feel like they've lost that fight, so they need someone else to blame. And they've settled on the transgender community, and it's disgusting. That this isn't what America is about in any way, shape, or form. And I think no matter how many times people say that, this is about protecting religious rights are guaranteed by the Constitution. And for anyone to say my religion, my beliefs should impact your constitutional rights, your your worth as a person, your ability to live as an equal American, when that happens, that person is the person violating religious freedom because they're trying to enforce their religious beliefs on everyone else. So it's been frightening. I can't think of a better word other than it's frightening to see the hatred that is out there for no reason other than they don't know a transgender person, and they run with the lies and the misconceptions that are out there, and they refuse to open up their eyes and open up their heart to learn that transgender people are no different than anyone else. They just simply want to live their lives without fearing for their lives.
Exactly. And when you look at the entire rainbow from the LGBTQ community, do you agree that with recent events that the transgender community within our community is the greatest marginalized group, the group that needs the most focus right now, or do we still have a lot of work to do as a larger group as well, don't we?
Well, we certainly still have a lot of work to do as the larger group, but absolutely the transgender community or transgender family are by far the most marginalized, the most at risk, and we as a community we have to be their allies. You know, we ask the straight community to be our allies, and we have to be the allies of our transgender family because they need us.
Absolutely agree. Thank you, Jim. Now, you came out early in the 2016 presidential race with support for candidate Hillary Clinton. Just for the record, we'll note that she is now the presumptive Democratic nominee. In recent days, we've also seen endorsements from President Obama and Elizabeth Warren. Can you tell us in your own words why you support Secretary Clinton? What would a Clinton presidency continue to do for the historic legacy of LGBTQ rights that started under President Obama? And do you think the country is ready to break this glass ceiling with Hillary Clinton?
Well, I hope and I certainly wish and think that our country is ready to break that glass ceiling, and I look forward to the day we do have a woman president. It's long past time for that. I endorsed Hillary Clinton and I support Hillary Clinton because she has the experience, the knowledge, and everything that goes along with being a president. She has it. I mean, she has been Secretary of State. She's been a senator. Her experience as First Lady. I don't think we could ask for a candidate better prepared to take on the role of president. And one of the things I really like about Hillary is that she has been open to learning and changing opinions. And I think that's one of the things we need to look for in our politicians. We need politicians who are always willing to learn more and to change their mind. You know, she has received criticism that she hasn't always been on the side of marriage equality. And, you know, that's okay. Because when we come out, we want our family and our friends to immediately say, oh, that's great, you're still the same person, we love you, nothing has changed. But that doesn't always happen. And when that doesn't happen, what we're hoping and what we're asking for our family and friends to do is to learn, to get to know us, to understand, and to change their opinion. And that's what Hillary has done. So I think that's fantastic. That's what I would look for in any candidate regarding any issue that matters to me. So absolutely, I'm proud to support her. I am very hopeful for November. And as far as what that would mean for the LGBTQ community, well, that would let us rest easy that we don't have to fear and worry about so many of the advances that we've experienced under President Obama, the many incredible things he's done for our community. We wouldn't have to fear losing those. We wouldn't have to fear living in a country led by someone who marginalizes us, believes we do not deserve the same rights. So for me and our community, it's vital that we have a Democrat sitting in the White House.
Thank you, Jim. And so speaking of the dark side, the Sith or evil emperors, does the presidential campaign and the rise of Donald Trump concern or frighten you in any way when we look at it in this context, that whoever inherits the White House after President Obama will be in a position to nominate Supreme Court judges, affect the outcomes and directions for millions of Americans, millions of LGBTQ Americans in this country, for better or worse. What does the presidential candidacy of Donald Trump mean to you, and is it terrifying?
It is terrifying. He has come out and stated publicly multiple times that were he president, he would nominate justices to the Supreme Court who would be willing and open to overturning marriage equality. And to think of our Supreme Court ruling to take away constitutional rights that have been granted to any group of people, that's a very frightening thing. And he has said he would do it. So yes, I'm scared by the thought of a Donald Trump presidency. And it isn't just for the LGBTQ community. The rhetoric and the horrible things that have been directed towards other groups of citizens. I mean, everything directed towards those of Mexican heritage and women and you name it. I mean, immigrants, Muslims. Again, all I can say is that is not what America is about. And that's what disturbs me and scares me the most about that candidacy, is it's all about hate. It's all about denigrating people. And we're better than that. As a people, as a country, we're better than that.
I agree. Absolutely. Thank you, Jim. So you have had the support of, and you've been working with the Human Rights Campaign and other LGBTQ organizations for advocacy. Can you tell us about Jim Obergefell, the activist? How busy have you been? How far across the country have you traveled? And what is your life like right now, Jim?
Well, my life is completely unlike anything I ever expected or ever thought would happen. I think maybe on average each month I have about 7 nights that I might spend in my own bed. And the rest of the time I'm traveling, working with those organizations, speaking with those organizations. I'm speaking at, doing speaking engagements at universities, at government agencies, at companies. So my life has turned into this really kind of nonstop round of speaking engagements, events. I've been on Capitol Hill lobbying. I've been involved with political campaigns. So it's absolutely completely different from anything I'd ever done, anything I'd ever thought about. And what I've discovered is it all comes down to the fact that I have learned and realized that being involved in something bigger than myself is really important to me. So it certainly can be crazy and tiring and overwhelming at times, but it's all for a really good purpose, and that makes it all worthwhile.
Now, you told me the last time we spoke that when you run into strangers, on the streets of Cincinnati or elsewhere, and people recognize you, that they thanked you for fighting for their love and for the incredible changes that you, in your case, helped bring this country to in Obergefell v. Hodges. So when you are doing these speaking engagements and shaking hands and meeting with people, what do people say to you, Jim?
It can all be distilled down to thank you, and they thank me for making their marriage, if they had been married in one state, they thank me for making their marriage exist no matter where they go, for work, for pleasure. They thank me for making the world a better place for their kids, for them. They tell me stories about people that they love, people they care about, and what this decision means to them. They show me photos of weddings. They tell me stories. They cry when they talk about someone they've loved who didn't live to see this. So it's all these wonderful, personal, moving experiences where people are just sharing things that are important to them, and all they can think to do is to shake my hand, thank me, hug me, and simply say thank you, because we're all living through something we never thought we would see. And it's absolutely the most incredible thank you that I could ever get.
It is. I can't think of a better way for us to wrap up our incredible discussion today, Jim. So Jim Obergefell, you are the author of Love Wins. Would you please tell our listeners where will they be able to find Love Wins, and will you be doing a book tour?
Yes, Love Wins comes out on Tuesday, June 14th. It will be available in bookstores nationwide as well as your favorite online retailer. And yes, I will be kicking off a book tour that will take me across the country. It starts on Monday in New York, but then goes from New York, Philadelphia, D.C., out to the Bay Area, and really all across the country. Love Wins has a Facebook page which will list those book signing events, so people could find the Love Wins page on Facebook and find out if there's an event near them.
Right, and I noticed that Twitter brought back the Love Wins hashtag with some special rainbow colors for the month of June. That was a nice touch.
Yes, it was. It was funny. The first day I tweeted in June, and I did the hashtag for the book, and thought, wait, why did that happen? It was a nice touch.
All right. Well, Jim Obergefell, author of Love Wins and the named plaintiff from Obergefell v. Hodges, which has changed all of our lives. Always a pleasure to talk to you, sir. Thank you for all of the work that you do for this country, for the LGBTQ community, and thank you for coming on Gay News Radio.
Thanks so much, Brandon. It was a great time. It was wonderful talking with you again.
Thank you, Jim. Good day, sir.
You too.
You've been listening to Gay News Radio on the GNR Radio Network. Download our mobile app for iPhone and Android today. And have a good gay.